Hi, here's Florian, and I'm today here with Mike. Mike, give us a short introduction.
Sure. So, hi, my name's Mike Silley. I'm a product manager at a company called GetYourGuide. My main focus is essentially building and developing out the marketing systems and trying to essentially automate them at scale. So, a little bit about GetYourGuide. We're a tours and attractions marketplace online. We're one of the largest in the world. We have tens of thousands of products all over the world. And if you want to essentially buy Eiffel Tower tickets and you don't know where to go, you can buy it through us. Or if you don't want to wait in line, you can buy it through us. And we have types of products like that everywhere to shark diving, off the coast of Philippines. We have, tours if you want to essentially learn how to cook pasta from an Italian mama in Sicily. Pretty much everything tourist related, and our main goal is essentially to turn trips into amazing experiences. And my main product focus is the marketing side. So because we market across over a dozen languages, the main goal is instead of having 20, 30, 50, 100 people doing marketing, we try to automate all those processes and learnings, and that's my main goal.
Awesome. So you have a lot of experience being a product manager for like a agile team with an agile team. So what do you would say is the most important thing about agile? Like where's the big plus point about it?
Sure. So Agile is a great methodology essentially to streamline work and make sure that the team as a whole is working as effectively as possible. Now, the one recommendation that I can make is don't do Agile for the sake of Agile because it sounds good or because everyone else is doing it. However, you have to start from somewhere. So the Agile methodology gives a very, very good guideline to how you should work. However, over time, as you become more experienced, you should try to tailor that to your team. Every team is different in terms of how long your sprints should be, in terms of how long you should have stand-ups and other ceremonies. So really trying to tailor it such that ultimately you're able to optimize your team's work. You're able to develop products faster and better than you would without it. And you're able to essentially change direction quickly and effectively without wasting context time. So that's essentially if you change direction, usually it takes time to ramp up again, and Agile methodology helps you change direction a lot faster if done properly.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the main points of Agile is that it helps you to bring the most out of the people. So especially for developers, like enable their creativity and then all together go in one direction. So we have like then the team role, which is like how you said it, like that it can one team for 2 pizzas, 1 to 2 pizzas. That's the perfect size. Then you have the product manager. So what you would say is the main job of the product manager?
Sure. So the main job of the product manager, the way that I look at it, is essentially to be the butter of the team. So to make everything go smoothly and ultimately deliver a product on time and to the acceptance criteria that you define. So you mentioned it very well that product teams should be quite small and quote unquote agile in that sense. And if you think of the key term agile, it means you're able to move quickly, you're able to communicate with your team very effectively. So the teams should be quite small, and that's where the idea of 1 or 2 pizza boxes, that the team shouldn't grow beyond that. So it isn't a massive corporate team with 100 developers and you're moving quite slowly and everyone has one little small part to do, where, as you mentioned, your creativity might not be fully enabled or leveraged, where you're only just coding one part. Instead, essentially, everyone is encouraged to contribute to ideas within the team and be able to leverage those ideas from whether it be developers, or in my case, I have developers, analysts, and then also some domain specific specialists on the team, to give their ideas and then essentially move forward on those ideas effectively.
Yeah, awesome. So, how you reach effectiveness as product manager together with your team? What like your main metrics is for that?
The main metrics is the main metrics for success are the success that we have within the team. So my team is not a front-facing product team in the traditional sense, where I have user experience concerns to deal with. Instead, it's very, very back-end. So I work with back-end engineers, data analysts, again, some specialists. So our goal, we have some revenue targets that we want to hit. We have some system stability targets that we want to hit. And a lot of it has to do with one of the planning processes that we do every quarter is called OKRs, which are objectives and key results. Yeah. So we have a longer term roadmap, which it's encouraged that it's supposed to be used as a guideline, not necessarily waterfall in the sense that we have to do everything, but it essentially gives the direction of where we want to go into. And it should be updated regularly. Then from there, we have the objectives and key results, which are quarterly based. Yeah. And from there, those should be essentially measurable and actionable. So these are goals where we say, all right, this is something that we actually want to solve, either to enable us to do something or to have some end goal, whether it be revenue specific or system specific. And then from there, we want it to be measurable. And we always try to choose goals that are realistic but incredibly ambitious. Yeah. And during the planning process, we actually try to validate those ideas as much as we can. Okay. So what we don't want to have happen is us say, oh, we can grow the business 500% in 1 month, and it's just not realistic. And likewise, we don't want to say, oh, we're going to grow the business 0.000001%, where it's not ambitious, and it's also very, very hard to measure that impact that you have at such a small scale. Yeah. So we want something that's measurable, but also ambitious. And once we have that and we've been able to validate it, then we generally have the projects we want to hit. Not necessarily in some prioritized order. That's the idea where Agile comes in, where we can continue to validate, but we have these big ideas where we say, this is where we think we can tackle, over the quarter. And then we get to work. And this is now moving to the weekly or bi-weekly sprint plannings where we essentially get together and we say, okay, what are the highest impact projects we want to tackle? What does that mean in terms of what it'll look like, in terms of how long it'll take, and in terms of who needs to be involved with those projects? And that's where the product manager comes in, where essentially they're ultimately responsible for those end goals. They're ultimately responsible for making sure that the team's potential is maximized throughout the quarter and onwards. So yeah, it's a lot of communication within the product manager's roles within the team, but also outside of the team, to make sure that there are no dependencies that are gone without being seen, and then later on you run into issues. Yeah. Make sure that you don't step on other team's toes as you develop. And also making sure that you balance the planning or the discovery with also the development side of things. So what that means is you don't want to have 40 hours of the developers developing and that's it. Otherwise, again, they become essentially just coding monkeys, and that's maybe 20% of their true potential. A lot of their potential is really knowing what the forefront of innovation is and how to best solve problems. So you need to actually get those ideas back to the team and back to the planning phase. But at the same time, if you have 40 hours of planning, then you don't get anything done. So there's a sweet spot, and it's not in the middle. It's essentially trying to find the sweet spot where you can actually discover new ideas to tackle, but also still maximize the developers' developing time, and essentially make sure that they're not distracted. And this gets back to the idea of those context switches, where if you don't have this clear workflow, or there are things that are uncertain, what happens is the developers during the development process will need to stop and then either validate assumptions as they go, or if you hit a dependency, then there's a stop that happens, or all of a sudden, if you realize that something, you need to work on something else, then you need to switch. And if you think about, whenever you sit down and you start working on something very complex, and then all of a sudden you need to move to something else very complex, it takes time for your brain to ramp up. Yeah. So you want to minimize that ramp up time within your team to, again, maximize the ends of the team. Yeah.
That's like a really good trick. So, if you say like to be more effective, you try to get a balance between like the planning and the programming. How you think about it? Like you say, you always be more flexible of how much you need from what, or do you have like in your head a certain metric?
There has to be some flexibility, and I think that flexibility also comes with some experience. However, there are some rules of thumb as well. So whenever there's some planning that happens, my general view is there should be at least one engineer in the room, because if there's some planning and then you get to a point where you say, okay, now we actually want to develop this, and the engineers say, oh, that's not feasible at all. Yeah. If you all of a sudden say, oh, we want to do some advanced neural network to solve world hunger tomorrow, this is what we've came up. It sounds great in planning, and they say that's just not possible. Yeah. Then you've wasted your time. So you definitely want that engineering feedback early on. Similar to if you're working with a product team that has some design aspects to it. Is you want the designers there early, and you want them there often. But it doesn't necessarily mean you need all designers there and all developers there. So in the discovery phase, which is essentially the phase where you identify the ideas and you validate those ideas, you want some engineering insights in essentially all points as you move forward, but not necessarily all engineering insights. And likewise, during the actually development of the products that have been validated, that have been streamlined already, you would want some product insights to make sure that things are going smoothly, but you don't need the product manager there working 100%. Otherwise, you essentially have someone who's micromanaging, and it's not good for anyone. So there has to be a balance, and it also depends on the level of complexity of the project, how long you've been planning it. So it really, really depends. But generally, the rule of thumb is you have that discovery and development happening in parallel. So these parallel work streams where discovery, you're essentially validating tests, you have some ideas, and then the delivery is you're actually developing. Yeah,
correct. So one of the most important things is communication, right?
Yes, absolutely. So there has to be clear communication within the team, and also clear communication outside of the team in terms of what's happening. If there isn't clear communication, what happens is things slow down. Again, you come to halts. All of a sudden, you need to validate ideas, or you work a week or two, and then you realize there's a better solution, which is wasted time. So that's very important. And also the communication, it also depends on your team composition. So, again, my team we have quite a cross-functional team. So it's not only developers, but there's also people from other disciplines. Yeah. So making sure that, everyone knows what everyone else is working on, at least to some degree, not again to the most degree. Otherwise, then the data analyst is essentially understanding things to the same level of a developer, which doesn't necessarily make sense. And a developer understanding the same level of analysis to an analyst doesn't make sense either. So you do want this division of labor to some degree. It also matters where the team sits. So is your team co-located all together, or do you have a remote team that you're also working with? Are there time zones, differences? Are there cultural differences, that you need to keep in mind? So the team that I have specifically, we have essentially our team co-located. So, it's in the same time zone, so we don't have any issues in terms of having to wait, 8 hour difference between the States and here. But there are some issues that could come with this if clear communication isn't built within the team. Yeah.
So you have problems with the remote work issue because you're way more effective if you're sitting in one room.
Yeah, so the rule of thumb again is generally if you're all sitting in the same room, you can quickly just talk with the people. My personal view is in general that's better. However, there are also some downsides to that insofar as if you're remotely connected, then also you're going to be working quite a bit and you're only going to be disturbed when there's actually a question, as opposed to just someone, every single question they have, they're going to be raising it with you. So there are trade-offs. I haven't had that much of an issue with a remote team. And I think one of the main reasons why is within the team there is a tech lead that essentially I communicate with, that essentially I'm able to, instead of having to reach out to every single engineer and understand what's happening, and again, that's a waste of my time and a waste of all the engineering's time. There's one engineer that essentially is that point person that I'm able to communicate with product ideas, and they're able to communicate technical ideas back.
Yeah. So just reduces the whole managing time a lot, because you have only one contact point and the contact point.
Exactly. It's just trying to streamline things as much as possible, as much as possible. And again, there's a trade-off. The more you streamline things, the higher likelihood that there'll be things lost in communication and lost in translation. Yeah. Again, if you communicate with everyone all the time, there'll be no misunderstanding, but you won't get anything done. Yeah. So you wanna streamline to some degree. But also there are still some touch points just in case, I really need to understand something deeper, or if someone's a domain expert, then I can really dive into that. But it is good to streamline generally, because again, not everything, there aren't issues with every single point of the development phase. So for all of that the communication can be streamlined, and then any bits that really there's issues with, then we can dive into it further.
Yeah, this makes sense. So that's the reason why you said like a product manager should have a good understanding of everything, or a lot, and then just goes deeper where he needs to go deeper. Yeah,
I would say that in an ideal world, everyone, in a perfect world, everyone would know everything about everything.
Everything, yeah.
But that's just frankly not realistic. So, for a product manager, for myself, it's important to know the higher level concepts. It's important to know the development process itself, on how things are going. Yeah. And then essentially understanding from the developer's perspective where people are, and then having that trust with the team. So, not necessarily knowing exactly what's happening, all the lines that are code, reviewing essentially, pull requests. I don't do that. Yeah. That's something that wouldn't be the optimal use of my time, and I wouldn't be the best at it either. Yeah. So it's something that that's left for developers. But yeah, it's a balance. So getting back to the idea of being like butter, there was a time where we didn't have a data analyst on the team. And when that happened, we still needed people to validate the ideas. And then the question is does it come to the developers or somebody else or myself? And I have some background in analysis. So instead of having the developers, not necessarily waste their time, but be distracted from where their best focus is, this is where I say it's the job of the product manager to quote unquote be the butter and essentially make things go smoothly. So then I would take on that burden or that opportunity to find or validate ideas and then pass that forward. So again, making sure everyone's as streamlined as possible.
Yep.
Similarly, if there's bigger developer, if they're bigger essentially projects that are happening, and we need some small scripts to be written, that's something that I could ask the developers to do, and it could take them not that long to do, and they would do it very well. Yeah. But it would still mean a context switch. So then that's something that I would say, okay, how often are we just going to use the script once or twice? Then I'll probably write it and be done with it. And then that way they can still focus 100% on what they need to focus on.
Yeah. So being effective is a lot about like keeping context switches as low as possible.
Yeah. Keeping context switches as low as possible for the team. and minimizing it as well for yourself. However, one of the hardest bits of being a product manager is the high degree of context switches you have, because you're dealing with people from different departments, you're dealing with people from different teams, you're dealing with different ideas, and a lot of ideas don't work out even when you're validating them, and then you have to switch to the next one.
Yeah.
So really switching around and trying to understand the problem space as much as possible.
That's good. That's awesome. So, what is, out of your experience, the most important values for a team that can work together in an agile environment?
That's a good question. I would say communication is very, very important. I would say also some motivation, and the motivation is essentially the being able to relate to the mission itself. Yeah. So are you motivated by what you're doing? Are you motivated with the end goal? Do you agree with the end goal? Are you aligned? That's incredibly important. And then also having good rapport and positivity within the team. So that's incredibly important as well. So things don't always go the way you'd want, and as essentially you run into roadblocks, how you deal with them. Do you get stuck? Do you get frustrated as a team? That's also very, very important. And I mean, of course, I'm not talking about any hard skills, because it really depends on the team and it depends on what you're trying to do. And there are, a lot of smart people out there, but I'm talking more about essentially the organizational behavior of the team, and the team dynamics that essentially make a successful team.
So you check also like on the personality wise of the team to have a good mixture in there, or how you think about that, especially if there's like problems coming?
I think it's very, very hard to determine whether or not somebody will fit into a team before they're on the team. I mean, that's a good point, yeah. I mean, somebody might be a great person, but just not get along with somebody else, or might not like or is great on an all-star on one team, but then really just doesn't enjoy the problem space, or it doesn't excite them. I mean, there's also the fact, and this gets before you hire people. There's obviously just general, I guess, red flags that you can watch out for in terms of when you're interviewing someone. But once someone's in the company, usually they're a motivated person. They get along with a lot of people, and then the question is how they fit within the team. And I think part of that is just naturally how they fit within the team and whether or not they like the problem space. But I think a lot of it can be cultivated as well. So what this means is essentially, again, creating that environment for the team to succeed, making sure that the team does have the support they need, making sure that if somebody runs up against a blocker, that if you're able to help them unblock that or communicate that blocker as quickly as possible, such that they're not stuck there for a week or 2 weeks, or even a few days and just getting frustrated, because that's not fun. And it doesn't matter how nice or how good the people are or how good at communicating. If you're stuck against a blocker 2-3 days a week, every week, it gets frustrating and it's not going to be a fun team. So it's about cultivating those team dynamics, as much as possible.
So that's really, again, being the butter.
That's definitely the role of the product manager. However, it also falls on everyone else in the team to do that. So it falls on everyone else in the team to essentially cultivate that positive team environment. And it also, it's the role of the product manager, again, to execute on the team's mission. And the first thing that you can do with the team's mission, again, is coming up with these ideas on what you can do. And the product manager, I think there's a responsibility to come up with ideas and challenge ideas. But ultimately the best ideas come from other people in the team, because they're the ones working closest with the projects, really understanding the nuances of what's happening, and also being at the forefront of technology and innovation, and saying, hey, there's this new thing that came out that we might be able to use. Let's explore it. So really fostering the team to essentially be able to, again, promote those team dynamics themselves is very important.
So No, like that's like two big points. You always collect ideas, so everyone is a part of it to bring ideas in, but you also challenge everything all the time, probably.
Yes, yeah. So I wouldn't say challenge everything all the time. I think that would also get frustrating.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely you want to validate those ideas, and I think this gets back to a bigger question about confrontation.
Yeah.
There can be negative confrontation, and there can be positive confrontation, and this gets to challenging ideas, how you challenge the ideas. And also the trust that you have between people. So if it's somebody you don't know at all and all of a sudden you say, oh, this is a terrible idea, why would you even think this? That's not a good way to approach it.
Yeah.
Now, if you know the person very well and you say this is a terrible idea, it's still probably not the best way to approach it, but there's that trust there already. So trust is important. And then secondly, how you approach challenging those ideas. So whether it be challenging the timelines in development. So how long will this take? Oh, it'll take 2 weeks. Oh, is that realistic? Is it ambitious? Is it ambitious enough? Too ambitious? What do other people think? So really just communicating this and challenging people to think through their ideas, is very important. And likewise, it's very, very important for the team to also, challenge the product manager.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it isn't the role of the product manager to say, this is what we're going to do. Go work on it.
Yeah.
It's the role of the product manager to align all the ideas in some level of prioritization, and the team to challenge that, and the team to say, well, we don't necessarily agree with this. Why did you put it here?
Yeah.
And then for me to essentially explain that. And if I can't explain that properly, then maybe I haven't done my job properly, or I need to go back to the drawing board. So at the end of the day, people are a lot more effective if they're working on something they agree with.
Yeah.
And if you say, hey, we need to work on this, and they say, well, we don't think that's going to have any impact, and I say, go ahead and work on it. They can work on it, even if it would have an impact. It's not going to be done properly, and it probably won't have an impact just because the passion won't be there, the creativity won't be there. So it's partly what you do, but it's also how you do it as well. That's very, very important.
Yeah. And they will be even more motivated if it's their idea.
Yeah,
what they're working on. So that's like, then the highest one. Awesome. So for planning in general, I think this includes what we said. You're planning only the main things, and then you're figuring out in a team together what makes sense and how to go on. So that you have at the end a plan where everyone put their feedback in and agree to it completely. And then you execute it in a sprint, and then you come back and see.
Yeah. So this gets into the general planning process. So we have, essentially a set of ideas that we have where we quarterly say, these are the big, you can consider it, things we want to work on. And generally we have it quite vague. So we have it metrics driven. So we don't say, oh, we want to, do A, or build A, because, A might not be actually the best thing to do. Yeah. So we would usually say we want to, either, some teams would say we want to increase engagement, whatever engagement is, whatever metric is, by X%. Yeah. And then how they do it is essentially, once everyone says, okay, we think we can probably do this because we have a lot of ideas around engagement, then we start, ordering them in terms of where we think the impact will be, and then validating those assumptions as well. So what work do we need to do in terms of writing out any technical specifications, product specifications? What do the acceptance criteria look like? Yeah. What tests do we need to run in order to validate the parts, the smaller parts? And it gets around a lot to how you formulate what you want to do. Yeah. And how you're able to break it up in smaller pieces such that you can validate those pieces and move forward with some degree of confidence, as opposed to trying to tackle a massive project at once and then realize it doesn't work.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. Yeah. That's probably also the main job of the product manager, and the team supports that just always with the feedback and their own
Exactly.
input. Yeah.
So it is the main job of the product manager to keep that organized and moving forward. However, the product manager is a lot less effective in doing that if the team doesn't provide their feedback and doesn't challenge and doesn't give their ideas. So that's also critical to the team's success.
Yeah, awesome. Mike, it was a pleasure.
Cool. Thanks a lot for having me.
And then see you next time.
Yeah, looking forward to it.